So Tim and I each have an individual and a story together of just the Lord's call to the work that we do. I felt very called at a younger age in the middle school. I went to a camp, and during one of those services, the Lord just spoke so clearly to me that this is what I was supposed to do with my life. And so in the coming years, I took short-term trips, started to see the world, see different types of work. And while Tim was there, he met me. He wasn't necessarily thinking this type of work, but when we started dating and we were getting serious, this was a conversation we had to have because I felt a very clear call, and he didn't necessarily have this clear call, but he did know that he would follow the Lord and be obedient to whatever he asked. And so we just really felt a peace that the Lord had a plan for our lives together. Mm-hmm. And so after that, we did 6 years of ministry in church. And it was in that time we just kept saying, Lord, just show us and let us know like when and what it looks like to go. And it was during this time we were praying, we were giving, we were doing a small group that was all about global work. And it was in that, and taking short-term trips. Mm-hmm. And then we went on a short-term trip. And it was while we were on that trip, having dinner with a worker, that he said something that individually both jumped in both Tim and I's spirit. And later when we went back to the hotel room that night, we just sat and talked, and we both just at the same moment had felt the Lord just saying, this is it. And the Lord had been unsettling us, and we didn't know what was next and the Lord just spoke very clearly, like, this is the step, this is where I'm leading you. And he only gave us what felt like little bits and little steps to keep walking forward in, and not how it was all going to work out. But we took those steps forward, and it's been an incredible journey just to see how the Lord has just brought us together in this work for a place that we never imagined we would live or serve in, with both just a passion to see the gospel shared here.
Yeah, I just remember that night so clearly. And this was actually something we had prayed before, because when we got married, I knew Angie had this call in her life. And I remember committing to her, I said, even if it comes down to it, I'll follow you, because I know you'd be being disobedient to what God has called you to do if we didn't have a season, at least, where we were engaged in this type of work. And the whole time, not believing it would come to that, but willing. And one of the things we believe God spoke to us and we prayed was that God was going to get us on the same page for the same place at the same time. Because we had several moments in the 6 years of ministry. We committed to 2 years with the church when we first started. We said we won't go anywhere for 2 years. It was 6 years later before we left. But we just had these different tugs at moments. Maybe it's here, maybe it's this, and we never were in sync with it. And it was that night. I mean, we were laying on the bed in the hotel room in Cairo, and it was just so clear. Like, did you felt that, right? Like, was that? Did you sense that as well? And it was just such an innocent moment. But God did it. He did that exact thing that He had placed in our hearts before, that we believed for. He got us on the same page for the same place at the same time. And we were in a place where thankfully we were open and ready to say yes. We were saying, God, I'll take the step you put in front of me and trust you for where we end up. And that was kind of our heart all along our journey in life together. And then that moment was just so impactful when we realized how clearly He had spoken to both of us. There's plenty of moments where as you're walking, you're like, I don't know that I get this. I don't know that I understand. I don't see where this is headed. I don't see what's going on. And we had a couple times in our walk and journey when all of a sudden God, and it's those defining moments, God gave us this ability to look back with clarity and say, oh, God, I see what you were doing. I see how you were forming in us, how you were working in us, what you were developing in us, to continue to lead us down this path that you have for our life. And in the moment, it's hard to see it, but you get those moments to look back. Those are those monuments that the Israelites would build to look back to, right? And this is this idea, a couple of big ones. I mean, one, we could talk about just God divinely opening doors, very clearly showing us people and here that He has lined up for us. I think of a moment where I had met a friend of my coworker here in country. He took me out with his friend one day. I'd met him. A week later, we were in our team prayer meeting and we were just praying, God, show us. We believe we're living in our neighborhoods for a reason. You've put us here. We didn't just land here by accident. Show us the people of peace. Show us those people who you have ordained and put in front of us. And the very next morning, my doorbell rings and I go down. It's very early in the morning. It's a very rare time for the doorbell to ring here. And I open the door, and standing there is a guy with the internet company to install internet. And standing next to him is the guy who I had just met the week before. He's the friend of my colleague. He actually lives 5 houses down the street from us. We had no idea. I don't think God, when we prayed, moved his home, relocated him into our neighborhood. But God so clearly showed us, take a step. I'm working. I'm doing things, follow in obedience, felt the peace about this being the right home. And so we're here. And then that morning we meet him. I stand, he's right there. God says, you see, I'm working things, I'm doing things. Another huge moment was as we were preparing to come here, we came in the middle of a global pandemic. We moved internationally, which, as you can very much imagine, is a very difficult thing to do. But it honestly was super smooth. I mean, we look back when we landed here and we sat down with the kids and we wrote them out, 47 miracles that we realized God had done since May, the long weekend in the spring, all the way through the summer into us landing here in October. 47 miracles that God did, raising our support, get doors being open, getting travel approvals from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, getting visas for the family. The fact that I came in 1 week, I had my residency, I had my license, I had my rental agreement, and I had the entire family's visas approved in the matter of an hour and a half from when I submitted them to got the approval. Like, these things are unheard of. And what we realized is we could reason them away as coincidence, but they weren't. They were God at work as you take step after step, following as he leads you. He goes before you and he opens the doors that only he can open. And you also get to trust that he's going to close the doors that he needs to have closed. That when things stop, when there is a roadblock, maybe we need to be prepared and ready to say, okay, God, what are you doing in this? Those are those moments where your journey and your step feels a little more difficult. And then when you get to those moments of, oh, there's the open door, you say, okay, God, I see what you're doing. I see how you're working in this. And so it's been cool to see God's faithfulness. Shocker, he's been faithful. He has followed through on his end. And every time we get to these moments, we realize our faith is growing. He uses those moments to increase your faith. Every time you look back and see how he was at work, man, I got even more faith. And he uses that faith now for the next moment of, I don't get it, I don't know, but your faith carries you through and you trust and know that God will be faithful. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, without any hesitation or doubt, as we walk and take a step God has called us to take, he will be faithful in that step to lead, to provide, to guide, and we trust him for it every step of the way.
Remembering a very distinct moment in just what the Lord did to bring us here. We felt clearly we were supposed to come here, and then the world kind of got turned upside down and just so much just going back and forth and uncertainty. And then the Lord just really gave us a peace. I want you to go. Like, now is the time. There is no delay. Like the truth of who I am needs to be shared. And this global pandemic or not, you need to go. Yeah. And so with that, it was like, okay, Lord, then I don't know how we will accomplish this in this time frame that you've given us, how we would accomplish this in the midst of, a global pandemic and everything that's happening on. It seems impossible, but we said, okay, Lord, we'll take steps forward. Yeah. We'll start selling our furniture. And it was even just these little things where I felt like we just were like, okay, we'll just take this next step. And literally just like Tim said, 47 things just where God was taking care of every single detail, big and small, of selling everything to getting us visas and entrance and all the things to get our family, to
Yeah.
where we are.
I think of a couple things when it comes to how do we get ready. The first one is we got to learn the voice of God. If you're going to hear him call, you have to know his voice. So part of how you do that, obviously, we hear God speak through his word. We hear God speak through godly leadership and mentors. And we hear God speak in like these moments of prayer and meditation with him on the word and communion with him. And it just takes time. So what I would say is, one, position yourself, align your heart with God's heart. What are the things that we know God's heart is for? God's heart is for his children. He's for his lost children, those who don't know yet. He tells the story of the shepherd who leaves the 99 to go after the one. We know this is God's heart. God's heart is for every child of God, every child that he has created all around the world. So let's align our hearts with that. Some things we know. The other side of it is also, let's align ourselves with God's will. I know a lot of times when we say, boy, we talk about this call, and this isn't us moving here. I couldn't find it in the Bible. I tried to find our names where God says, you are going to go to the Arabian Peninsula, but I couldn't find it. But what I could find are a lot of things in the Bible of God's known will. And I would say, if we expect God to trust us with his unknown will, we have to show ourselves faithful with his known will. So what are the things in the word that we know we need to live up to, and follow that? Pursue the Lord, get close to him. And as you follow in the known will of God, he begins to reveal to you those things in his unknown will, those things that are a little more intangible, a little more difficult to maybe track, where we just say yes to the Lord. And I remember the pastor of the church I was on staff at, he used to say this thing. He always used to say, don't do the math, do your part. And so I think it applies here. And this isn't just in giving, this is in our lives with our time. We so often try to look 10 steps ahead and say, where are we going to go? What do we need to do? And then I'll do what you need to get there, Lord. I'll do that for you. But what I believe God says to all of us is to say, just take the step that I put in front of you and trust me for where you end up. Take that step, one step at a time, follow me. So the goal is, if we want to do that, all we have to do, it's one thing, just say yes to the Lord. When he asks you to take a step, just say yes and trust him for where that step goes. And when it's a step that is in front of you because you are walking in the known will of God, you have your heart aligned with God's heart, these kind of things happen. You see God lead in ways that maybe you didn't expect, but they are always ways that you can trust him in.
I think prayer is just such an important thing when it comes to this type of work. When you're not sure what's my role, what's my part, engage in praying for the work, for the gospel to go to all nations. There are a lot of incredible resources and ways, but it's a part that I think too often we forget because it's so simple. But the reality is prayer will precede any work that happens over here. So I always say, like, our partners in prayer right now, they are the part of breaking the ground to we will eventually seeing the church planted here. And they are the active part in what will happen here. And so I just think it's a part of our journey. We were part of a group consistently praying and advocating for those workers that we were praying for in Egypt. And it was through that I think God really grabbed our hearts, stirred our hearts. And it was along that journey that then the Lord asked us to go.